It turns out that Gotsi was a bad influence on Chonni. At school, he wasn't just known for charming the girls. He also had a reputation for heavy drinking. Unfortunately, this habit rubbed off on Chonni. Whenever they went out together, drinking became a regular part of their dates. Instead of heading straight home after school, they'd sometimes go to a short-stay hotel. It was clear that Gotsi's lifestyle was starting to take a toll on Chonni. Hello, and welcome to our channel. Today, we're diving into another chilling real-life story that will leave you both shocked and speechless. This time, our story comes from Rajshahi city, located in the Rajshahi division of Bangladesh. It's a tale about a family whose outwardly harmonious appearance hides some deeply unsettling secrets. Behind closed doors, the relationships between family members were anything but normal, leading to a series of events that are as heartbreaking as they are baffling. Curious about what really happened? Stick around as we uncover the full details of this gripping case. Let's dive in. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this with your friends. It's a story you won't want to miss. So, here's how it goes. In the city of Rajshahi, Bangladesh, there lived a beautiful girl named Chonni, born in 1991. Chonni was an only child and had struggled with health issues from a young age. Diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, a condition where the body's immune system mistakenly attacks healthy cells, she often faced challenges that required special care. Her family was deeply protective and doted on her, especially her older sister, Aisha, who took on the role of her constant companion. Here's an interesting twist. Aisha wasn't Chonni's biological sister. She was adopted by their parents during a long period when they struggled to have children. Eventually, Chonni was born, and the two sisters grew up close, with Aisha acting as both a sibling and a caregiver. Life took a tough turn when Chonni's mother passed away in 2011 due to complications from diabetes, leaving their father, Dipankar, to take on both parental roles. Though Chonni had often been cared for by her aunt, as her aunt's health declined, Chonni became more independent. By the time she was in high school, she was no longer the spoiled child she once was and even had a boyfriend named Gotsi. But here's where things went downhill. Chonni's father had no idea that Gotsi was a bad influence. Like many girls, Chonni was drawn to his bad boy persona. Gotsi had a reputation at school for charming girls, but he also had a darker side, a habit of drinking heavily. Unfortunately, this rubbed off on Chonni. Every time they went out, drinking became a part of their dates. Long story short, these bad habits took a toll. Chonni's autoimmune condition made her health fragile, and her excessive drinking with Gotsi eventually led to kidney failure. It was a harsh wake-up call for Chonni, who had to start dialysis twice a week and abandon the reckless lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. Despite his flaws, Gotsi proved to be loyal. He stuck by Chonni's side during her health crisis, accompanying her to treatments and offering support. He alternated his duties with Aisha, who remained Chonni's steady caregiver. Long story short, Chonni and her boyfriend, Gotsi, stayed together through thick and thin. They both attended Rajshahi State University, graduated together, and moved into adulthood side by side. Gotsi found a job at a private credit fund office in Rajshahi, while Chonni attempted to find work herself. Unfortunately, she faced rejection after rejection, unable to pass the health tests due to her ongoing medical condition. Gotsi's parents weren't thrilled about their son's relationship with Chonni. They worried her illness might pose challenges for their future, even fearing it could be passed on to their children. But love doesn't follow logic. Gotsi remained steadfast, his patience and devotion earning even Mr. Dipankar's admiration. Dipankar often marveled at the young man's commitment, calling him tireless and truly devoted. In 2017, Dipankar found love again. He reconnected with Jannat, a former co-worker who was a childless widow running a catering business with her nephew. After years of living alone, Dipankar sought permission from his daughters to remarry, explaining that he wanted companionship and stability rather than indulging in harmful habits or wasting money. Chonni and Aisha agreed, understanding his need for happiness. In September 2017, at the age of 50, Deepanka married Jannat, who was 44. The household grew livelier after the marriage. Chandni's health showed signs of improvement, and both daughters got along well with their stepmother. Things seemed to be going just as Deepanka had hoped. But in June 2020, during the height of the pandemic, tragedy struck. Deepanka contracted the virus and was hospitalized for months. Sadly, he passed away in August, leaving behind a family engulfed in grief. Chandni was especially devastated. She had always thought her illness would claim her life first, not her father's. But amidst their sorrow, Deepankar's foresight provided a sense of security. He left behind significant savings, a house, land, and paddy fields. Chandni, who didn't have a job, was able to lean on these resources, while Aisha worked as a server at a local inn. Jannat, meanwhile, focused on her catering business with her nephew, and Chandni eventually followed in her stepmother's footsteps, learning the ropes and contributing to the business. This ensured that Deepankar's legacy continued, and his family thrived even in his absence. By early 2021, however, Chandni's health took a sharp downturn. She began experiencing severe symptoms, uncontrollable shivering, frequent vomiting, and alarming weight loss. It was heartbreaking for the family to watch. She was admitted to Rajshahi City Hospital, but her condition required advanced care. Doctors referred her to a larger, better-equipped facility with more specialized staff. Gotsi, ever devoted, didn't hesitate to accompany her. They left for the bigger hospital, staying there for over a month. Gotsi sacrificed everything for Chandni, even quitting his job to be by her side full-time. His decision led to a heated fallout with his parents, who couldn't understand his dedication. They believed Chandni's condition was terminal and thought Gotsi's sacrifices were futile. But Gotsi didn't care. His loyalty to Chandni remained unshaken. Chandni's treatment journey is a long and emotional tale. Her 3 uncles had to sell 2 houses and their cars just to cover the mounting medical expenses. More than once, Chandni wanted to give up. She couldn't stand seeing her family sacrifice everything: time, energy, and resources, all for her recovery. But as they say, true struggles demand great sacrifices. Adding to the mix, Gotsi, her loyal boyfriend, had moved into their house after being kicked out by his parents. With no job or money, he relied entirely on Chandni's family for food and shelter. This situation led Deepankar's family and Chandni's uncles to discuss the possibility of marriage. They believed it was the right step to make Gotsi's presence official and silence the growing rumors about Chandni and Gotsi's relationship being improper. The road to engagement wasn't easy, especially since Gotsi's parents initially refused to give their blessing. However, after much persuasion, they finally agreed, and in February 2022, Chandni and Gotsi were officially engaged. The wedding was set for 6 months later. In April 2022, Chandni had to return to Nauhata for further treatment. This time, her uncle accompanied her because Gotsi claimed he was unwell. At first, her stepmother, Jannat, wanted to go, but she felt unprepared to handle medical matters and chose to stay in Rajshahi with Aisha instead. It wasn't long before Jannat began noticing something off about Gotsi's behavior. Though he claimed to be too sick to accompany Chandni, he seemed perfectly fine when chatting and laughing with Aisha. Still, Jannat dismissed her doubts. Gotsi had been loyal to Chandni for years, even standing up to his parents for her. The idea of him betraying her with Aisha, her future sister-in-law, seemed unthinkable. The next day, both Gotsi and Aisha failed to come home. While it wasn't unusual for Gotsi to stay at his parents' house, Aisha's absence was odd. She rarely spent nights away from home. Jannat tried to stay positive, convincing herself that Aisha might be staying at a friend's house. By Sunday afternoon, both Gotsi and Aisha returned together. Jannat chose to believe the best, that Gotsi had simply picked up Aisha from somewhere. But later, as Aisha slept in her room, Gotsi let something slip during a casual conversation with Jannat. He mentioned staying at Aisha's workplace the previous night. Curious, Jannat asked, "Oh, so Aisha had the night shift? That's why you got a free room there." Gotsi hesitated, stammering, Yeah, she worked the night shift until morning." Jannat couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling that lingered after the conversation. Something wasn't adding up. A few hours later, during a chat with Aisha, Jannat decided to cut to the chase. "Aisha," she asked, "yesterday was a morning shift, right? So why did you stay at work overnight?" Confused, Aisha replied that she hadn't stayed at work but had spent the night at a friend's house because of a farewell party. This left Jannat even more puzzled. Gotzi and Aisha's stories didn't match. Her gut told her something was off, though part of her still wanted to believe Gotzi was loyal. That night, determined to get to the bottom of things, Jannat snuck out of her room and checked Gotzi's. It was empty, despite him saying earlier that he would be staying there. Suspicious, she quietly made her way to Aisha's room. The door was locked. Grabbing a chair, she climbed up to peek through the vent above the door. What she saw left her shocked. Gotzi and Aisha were making out. Furious, Jannat banged on the door, shouting insults and demanding they come out. At first, neither Gotzi nor Aisha dared to respond, but when Jannat shouted that she had seen everything through the vent, they reluctantly opened the door and apologized. The next morning, Aisha begged Jannat not to tell anyone about what had happened. She feared Chonni's reaction. Her health was already fragile, and any stress could make things worse. Aisha also reminded her stepmother that the wedding was only a few months away, with invitations already sent. If the truth came out, it would cause chaos, and Chonni's uncles would be livid. Reluctantly, Jannat agreed to keep quiet, but only after extracting a promise from both Gotzi and Aisha that nothing like this would ever happen again. Jannat felt conflicted. On the one hand, she pitied Chonni, who had been with Gotzi for over a decade but, due to her illness, couldn't fulfill certain aspects of their relationship. On the other hand, she wondered if Gotzi's growing closeness to Aisha was inevitable. If Chonni's health took a turn for the worse, perhaps Gotzi and Aisha would eventually marry. After all, Gotzi was a good man despite his faults. Only time would tell. This wasn't the first time Gotzi's charm caused trouble. Earlier, the family had hired a household assistant to help with chores and care for Chonni. Unfortunately, Jannat once caught the assistant and Gotzi together in the bathroom. Without hesitation, the assistant was fired that very day. Gotzi, however, was forgiven, partly because his removal might devastate Chonni's already fragile condition. In early July 2022, just a week before the wedding, Jannat once again caught Gotzi and Aisha in the act, this time making out in the kitchen. Though it was brief, it was enough to make her furious. Before she could react, Gotzi pulled her aside and begged her not to tell Chonni. "There's a long explanation," he said, "but let's save it until after the reception. Please don't ruin this wedding." He pleaded desperately, making it clear that canceling the wedding was not an option. Truth be told, even Chonni's uncles were growing weary of Gotzi. His laziness had become glaringly obvious, especially after the engagement ceremony. He rarely accompanied Chonni to her hospital appointments anymore, choosing instead to lounge around the house, watching movies or playing games, all while living off Deepankar's family's money. His true colors as a freeloader were beginning to show. Fast forward to the wedding day. Chonni and Gotzi were officially married in front of family and friends. The ceremony went as planned, but the celebration quickly turned into chaos. Just hours after saying, "I do," Chonni suddenly suffered a seizure and was rushed to the hospital. Her condition was critical, leaving everyone panicked and praying for her recovery. Tragically, 2 hours later, Chonni passed away in the hospital, leaving the entire family in shock and grief. The aftermath was a mess. Chonni's 3 uncles were furious, especially when it was revealed that she had left her share of the family property to Gotzi. Heated arguments broke out over her funeral arrangements and the inheritance. Eventually, an agreement was reached. Gotzi would receive his late wife's inheritance but had to stay away from Aisha. There were already whispers among the family about a falling bed situation, with people speculating that Aisha might replace Chonni as Gotzi's wife. However, Gotzi made it clear he valued the inheritance more than his relationship with Aisha. Things took a strange turn when Gotzi and Aisha were noticeably absent during the family's gathering at the hospital. It turned out the two had gotten into a heated argument back at home. Aisha, furious over the situation, had hoped that with Chonni gone, she and Gotsi could finally be together. But Gotsi, choosing money over love, told her that their relationship had to stay under wraps for now. He assured her it was all part of a bigger plan. Once the inheritance was secured, they could marry secretly. He warned her to be patient, as her uncles were too intimidating to confront directly. After calming things down, the two crossed another line. They engaged in an intimate moment right in the living room. It was the ultimate betrayal, especially since Gotsi should have been at the hospital handling his wife's final arrangements. Their actions didn't go unnoticed. Jannat, returning home unexpectedly, caught them red-handed just as they finished. Outraged, she threatened to report them to the uncles. Panicked, Aisha immediately fled back to the hospital in a taxi to avoid further confrontation. Gotsi, meanwhile, stayed behind, attempting to plead with Jannat to keep quiet. He tried to convince her not to expose his relationship with Aisha, but Jannat had clearly had enough of his lies and betrayal. At this point, something completely unexpected happened. Jannat suddenly leaned in and kissed Gotsi in a way that left him stunned. Instead of pulling away, Gotsi shockingly embraced her, and things escalated quickly. The two ended up in the bridal chamber and engaged in an act that crossed every boundary of decency. As they were caught up in their moment, Chonni's uncle, Koyon, unexpectedly entered the house. What he saw was beyond belief. Enraged, Koyon attacked Gotsi, beating him unconscious. Jannat tried to explain, but Koyon's anger couldn't be contained. To everyone's surprise, Koyon then turned his fury into something else. He cornered Jannat and coerced her into a similarly dishonorable act, insisting she make up for her betrayal. Reluctantly, and feeling trapped, Jannat gave in, further spiraling the situation into chaos. What none of them realized was that Gotsi had regained consciousness. Furious and disoriented, he stumbled into the kitchen, grabbed a fruit knife, and stormed back into the room. In a fit of rage, he attacked Koyon while he was with Jannat, inflicting severe injuries. Koyon was rushed to the hospital, where he recounted the events to the authorities. Tragically, despite the doctor's efforts, Koyon succumbed to his injuries the next day. The police arrested Gotsi for the attack, and the fallout left the family in turmoil. Chonni and her uncle Koyon were buried in the same cemetery, their deaths a stark reminder of the destructive chain of events that unfolded. During the trial, the courtroom was filled with disbelief as the case unraveled into an unusual and tangled web of relationships and betrayal. Many were shocked to see Gotsi, once thought to be fiercely loyal to Chonni, revealed as someone with a far more complex and unpredictable nature. This was a man who had sacrificed everything for Chonni, leaving his job and being disowned by his parents, all seemingly for her sake. Yet, it turned out he had been in a secret relationship with Chonni's adopted sister, Aisha, for a long time. According to testimonies from Gotsi and Aisha, Chonni had discovered their affair before her death. At first, she was devastated and angry, but over time, she came to terms with it. Chonni understood that her health issues made it impossible to meet Gotsi's physical needs or give him the family he wanted. With her condition frequently deteriorating, she decided to allow Aisha to step in and fulfill that role. Chonni even saw the marriage to Gotsi as part of a larger plan to secure her family's inheritance for him, a reward for his unwavering care and support since they were teenagers. Gotsi's lawyer argued that his actions on the night of the incident were purely self-defense. He explained that Koyon, Chonni's uncle, had caught Gotsi and Jannat in a compromising situation and flew into a rage. The older man attacked Gotsi so violently that he fainted. When Gotsi regained consciousness, fearing for his life, he grabbed a fruit cutter from the kitchen and lashed out at Koyon, who was in the middle of another inappropriate act with Jannat. The defense claimed Gotsi acted instinctively, believing he would be killed otherwise. Jannat, meanwhile, expressed deep remorse for her actions. She admitted to being attracted to Gotsi and exploiting his secret with Aisha to manipulate him. She also confessed to engaging in inappropriate relations with both Gotsi and, shockingly, Koyon, all in the same day, just hours after Chonni's wedding and tragic death. Jannat described her actions as the culmination of poor judgment and desperation. In February 2023, the Rajshahi High Court delivered its verdict. Gotzi was found guilty of manslaughter in self-defense and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Aisha and Jannat were acquitted of any criminal charges, though their reputations were forever tarnished. To add to Gotzi's downfall, he was denied any share of Chandni's inheritance, which was instead divided between Aisha and Jannat. What lessons can we learn from this story?